Every great boxer, from the undefeated Floyd Mayweather to the former heavyweight champion Mike Tyson, had a unique boxing stance. Floyd Mayweather had mastered the Philly shell boxing stance, which gave him a massive advantage against many opponents, and it led him to beating the most boxing champs in history, while Mike Tyson used pekaboo boxing style to gain an advantage over the heavyweights who were taller than him. Mike Tyson also had a crazy punching power, which helped his aggressive style of boxing. Let's talk about different stances of boxing and how you can master it. Let's analyze the Philly shell boxing stance first. The Philly shell boxing stance relies on things like shoulder rolls and reflexes. The reason why it worked so well for Floyd Mayweather was because very less people know how to use it or how to master it. It can be tricky for your opponents if they fight someone with this stance. In this boxing stance, the user has his lead foot front and rear foot to the back. You should also keep your head hand low and your rear hand to guard yourself. You will use a lot of shoulder rolls for defense. Shoulder rolls can be tricky because most people use the orthodox or southpaw boxing stance, which does not really require that. You also need to be good at counterpunching because this boxing stance isn't the best for charging in. You can see videos of Floyd Mayweather where he uses a shoulder roll and then counters the opponent with a punch. It requires a lot of skill to learn and is most likely the hardest boxing stance to master. There are a few aspects a person needs to master in order to use this boxing stance well. Let's talk about a few of them. The first thing the user needs to master is both offense and defensive speed. This is extremely important because Philly shell is meant mainly for defense, and you will need to know how to counterpunch fast after slipping or doing a shoulder roll. To improve defensive and offensive speed, you can use a reflex bag or do a lot of mitt work because it improves both defensive and offensive speed at the same time. You can also use a slip line to improve defensive speed and light sparring or partner drills to improve your speed overall. Let's talk about the second thing you need to master in order to get better at the Philly shell boxing stance. The second thing you need to master in order to get better at the Philly shell boxing stance is better head and body movement. The reason why head movement is very important for the Philly shell boxing stance is because you have to protect your head, and it's a very vulnerable part of your body for combat sports like boxing or mixed martial arts. To master head movement, you can do drills like using a slip bag and shadow boxing. I have a whole guide on head movement mastery on my channel. It covers everything about head movement fast. Body movement is the hardest thing about the Philly shell because there will be many situations where you will be switching to a basic boxing stance when striking and then going back to the Philly shell. You also need to be moving around without making any mistakes because the Philly shell stance can be vulnerable against fighters who are extremely fast and have good power. One clean hit and it can be over for you, so you gotta be careful. Let's talk about the third aspect to mastering the Philly shell boxing stance. It is learning good footwork. Footwork is very important for the Philly shell because it dictates how you move, and it can help you to back down or charge in depending on the situation. If you can move around fast without making any mistakes, this style can work for you. Footwork is not really that hard to master, and you can learn it quickly by doing some footwork drills. The main thing for footwork in this style is just adapting to the situation. You can watch a video on how to improve footwork if you want to really get good at footwork. Let's talk about the fourth aspect which you need to master to get good at the Philly shell boxing stance, which is timing. Reason why timing is so important in this boxing style is because you need to make your moves at the right time. For example, 1 second of shoulder roll delay can cost you the whole fight. You need to be prepared for your opponent's punches. There will be times where you have an opportunity to knock out your opponent, so you need to be good with your timing. In my opinion, timing is built through training over a long period of time. For example, if you have had over 12 sparring sessions in total, you should already be quite good with timing already. Sparring is the best way to build timing for combat sports like boxing or mixed martial arts. You can also build good timing through things like mitt work. Let's talk about the fifth aspect to mastering the Philly shell boxing style. The fifth thing you need to get better at is better accuracy. Using the Philly shell boxing stance requires an amazing accuracy. There is a reason why Floyd Mayweather was one of the only people who had mastered this boxing stance. He had one of the best accuracy in the history of boxing. You will need good accuracy because there is a good chance you will win most of your fights by a split decision because it is a defensive boxing stance. You need to be able to land clean hits and protect yourself very fast. You can completely lose your balance if someone catch you off guard while using this boxing stance. Let's talk about the sixth aspect you need to master in order to use the Philly shell boxing style better. The sixth one is experience and IQ. The reason why experience and knowledge about this boxing stance is very important is because this boxing style requires all of the things I mentioned, like accuracy and reflexes. It requires a good level of intelligence to not make mistakes and know when to punch or when to fall back or strike. For any combat sport, whether it is boxing or mixed martial arts, you need to figure out the weakness of your opponent and use it to your advantage, or you need to find different ways to create an opening so you can knock out your opponent, which takes a lot of experience to figure out. What I mean is after a few sparring sessions, you will be good at most things in boxing, like accuracy or speed, so you should focus on developing your thinking skills in a fight. There are plenty of professional boxers who win fights by tricking their opponents or making them drop their guard, which gives them a massive advantage over their opponent. One of them was Mike Tyson. He used to watch a lot of boxing fights and gain knowledge from them. I think his coach or someone had tapes of all the old boxing fights, so it probably helped him out. That is pretty much what you need in order to pull off the Philly shell stance in boxing. You could pull it off without knowing those while training, but in a fight you will need them because your opponent is not going to be playing around. Let's talk about the pekaboo boxing stance this time and few of the things you can do in order to get better at it. So this boxing stance was used by Mike Tyson. It was most likely his coach who created this boxing stance, but Mike Tyson mastered it and was well known for using this against his opponents. So to get in this boxing stance, you need to crouch down a little bit while having your hands closely in front of you. Make sure that your hands are not far apart. Your elbows need to be tucked in to protect your body, and you have to keep your guard up. This boxing stance requires a very powerful punch. One of the reasons Mike Tyson was able to pull off this boxing stance was because of his punching power and speed. Make sure to adjust your head. This boxing style also requires things like slipping or rolling a lot. The advantage of this boxing style is that it is very good at close combat because it has a pretty good defense and you can land powerful blows while charging in towards your opponent. Let's talk about a few of the things you need in order to master this boxing stance. The first thing you need to get good to master this boxing stance is your defensive speed. I already covered how to master defense for boxing in one of my videos. You need to be really good at slipping, especially for this boxing stance. Let's talk about the second thing you need in order to master the Mike Tyson boxing stance. It is to get very good at throwing uppercuts. Mike Tyson had one of the strongest uppercuts in the history of boxing. Most heavyweights at the time were over 6 foot 2 inches, and he usually had a slight height disadvantage. It is not a big disadvantage, but he was very good at closing in towards his opponents by slipping and moving around fast so he could land clean uppercuts. Uppercuts can be painful if you land it the right way. To throw an uppercut, you need to pivot your foot slightly crouched down and throw a punch with full power. Many people are not good at uppercuts because uppercuts are not used all the time, like jab cross or hook. There is a really good boxing combination you can try out. It's a jab slip, a lead uppercut. It can work very well since many people are not used to it. It could be very unpredictable if you go try it out in front of someone who you train or spar with in your fighting gym. There should be an uppercut bag at boxing gyms, so you should go train with it instead of the regular heavy bag if you need to improve your uppercut. Uppercuts don't take that long to master. You could get fairly good at uppercuts in a few weeks of training. You just need a good form and you are good to go. Another thing you need is good shadow boxing speed. It is important because shadow boxing trains your footwork and everything else together, especially when you cannot make it to a boxing gym. Shadow boxing improves footwork by making you use it. Once you start shadow boxing for a few minutes a day, you will see improvement in everything about combat sports like boxing or mixed martial arts. Every champion in boxing did shadow boxing in their free time. Doing it for at least 10 minutes a day every day will improve everything. Make sure to get the pekaboo boxing stance and do things like rolling and throwing uppercuts while shadow boxing. This boxing stance requires people to charge in a lot of times, so you should get good at close combat.